I wanted to take a minute to interject here something that I only figured out or realized when I was reading some threads on BGG, and Mark Herman brought this up, and some of you may be thinking, "Well, duh," and so, I'm hoping that some people who hear me talking about this has the same epiphany that I did. Um, this comes under the heading of I should have known better, but it's one of those things you don't think about until you look more carefully at the force display sheets. And as I was playing, I wasn't paying enough attention to the way this was delineated here. And some of you already know what I'm getting at. But when you're in a campaign, as you're activating units, you put them over to the active side. And then if they're in a particular force hex, if it's say some ships that were activated, then they'll slide over here and you'll put them in a task force. If they're plane units and they're taking off and landing, let's say if it's from Guadalcanal or wherever, they're activated during the operation. And then when you come back to deactivate at the end of an operation, I was flipping these over, and you really shouldn't do that unless it was the end of the month. So that's what this unactivated inactive side up, deactivated active side up. So as you finish the operation, you come into your base or into port or into anchorage, and you'll leave them active side up and slide them over to this side of whatever force they're part of. Same with the ships. It's a little weird with the ships because this is the gunnery side, but the way I play, this is inactive, and then you flip it over so you know they're active. So now you've got an interesting set here, which makes perfect sense, because if you have another operation during that month, you can see exactly which units you can use for that next operation and which ones you can't. I can't use these planes. I can't use these ships. I can use these ships and these plane units. That's it for this particular force hex. And I was not doing that. I was flipping them over to the inactive side. But if it's still the same month, you need to make sure they're still on the active side, but slid to this deactivated, unactivated side of the force. And it makes this so much easier because I know for a fact that well, I won't say fact, I'm not going to review every single one, although if I did, and as you were watching, you probably noticed it and caught me on it, but I'm sure that I activated more than, or a particular unit. Probably wasn't too many, but I probably used some planes, for instance, and even I imagine if I go back, I might have used some infantry units more than once in a month, which is definitely not allowed. So once they've done their operation, they're done for the month, and there may be some time left in the month, but you can't use them. So this is really quite important when you get into campaigns and strategic scenarios. It's basically a mandatory thing you need to do so you can keep them separated. And again, once you see it, it seems fairly obvious why it's there, but I guess I just wasn't and part of it, I think, in the play of this, because some of these get kind of crowded. For instance, if I had it up like this, I just look on one side. Okay, this is the activated side. This is the deactivated side. But really, there almost should be 3 boxes for each force area, which could get kind of crazy, but that's really what's happening here. You have an activated box for your present operations, so they're being used for the battle cycles, and then you have an unactivated box for units that are not activated at all, and then you have another box for units that have been used during the month. They're deactivated, but you haven't flipped them yet, so you can see that you've used them, but you can't use them again during that month. So that's what that's all about. It makes me really want to, if I was good at graphics on the computer, somebody might think of doing this, is to create some force charts that would maybe have more space to do that. I mean, some of these forces or force sections are big enough. Some of them, on the other hand, up here, if you were using this, it just gets a little crowded. I mean, if I put some units that I used on the top, and then ones that were unactivated at all, so I could still use them during the month. I mean, you could do that. It gets very tight. That's another reason why I like using this extra force chart along with this task force, because this gives you the most room for task force. Oops, go back, you can see it. Talked about this before. This is more room for task force, and then this display sheet 2 is better for larger forces, especially when you're talking activated, unactivated side. So that's my little discovery that I was pretty dumb about, and just hoping I can prevent you from going through the same error. If it helps one person, I guess that's why I did it. So hope that helps. All right, the beginning of August turn in 1943, I'm going to give you a little bit of the state of affairs on this campaign and this theater as it stands right now. First of all, the Allied side has captured New Georgia in the month of August. They did that on the last really mini operation that they managed to force a retreat. That could have gone either way. We could have had a required retreat on the U.S. side. And if that required retreat happened, we would have had to actually, or we could have had the opportunity to roll against the troop quality, which was an 8. So it had actually, even though there could have been a forced retreat, there was only a 20% chance that would happen. So we've got one out of the 2 hexes that we need to have. The other one is going to be here, and I just want to show you a close-up of Bougainville Island. There's actually, I would say, 3 parts to it. There's the actual base hex here, and then Boone is here. That has a base hex, actually the OSB markers on there. And then Buka also has one. Buka is a separate island, but as you can see, there's actually part of Bougainville that is part of this hex. So I think what Don Johnson on BGG said, that basically it's so close that if you're on Buka, you're basically on this little part of the Bougainville Island as well. So basically that means that the US will have to capture one of these 3 hexes in order to fulfill the victory conditions. And they technically have 4 months to do it. So I imagine that it's, unless it's contested, we'll have to see what that brings, but they should have enough operational points to manage to get one of those. There's a division on this island with some steps missing. This has a brigade, and this has a regiment with a Marine battalion. So this would be the weakest as of right now. This is the next up, and then this one is the strongest. I would say if they can get a foothold here, then the Japanese are probably going to move in, try to activate and move in. And they can actually move in without attacking in certain circumstances, just to reinforce. So we'll see if this gets to be a pretty big melee. Beginning of August, we have some ships here. There's the seaplane tender as usual. There's actually a couple of CVEs here, and then the main forces over here. And then the Japanese have the combined fleet here, and of course the various infantry units, and one F air and one T air here, along with some ships. So destroyers and transports. So that's the setup, and the first phase is weather. Weather is going to be automatically clear in August. We'll have to wait till September to have a 20% chance of rain. And then strategic intelligence, we'll roll for that again. A 4 and a 3. This time, I believe the US is at level 3 intelligence, and the Japanese are still level 2 because they got a 4. So not a ton of difference. Remember, the intelligence level's really going to affect the reaction player. So whoever the reaction player is, that's really the intelligence level you're looking to figure out at that point. Okay, we skip all these strategic scenario blocks and go to command points. And now we did a little bit of force pools for both sides. They have a few points each in their future command point pools. And then the US gets 45 and the Japanese get 15, again at the beginning of August. I'm not going to save any command points. Now I do have to note that if I had not done any, we did 2 operations actually in August. The second one was 14 days, and we didn't actually use all those days up. So we had another chance to do an operation, even though neither side had very many points. But if for some reason I hadn't put any command points into future pool, and we came around to the operation player determination where you bid, if no one had bid for an operation, then those command points would have been lost. So you have to kind of anticipate. If it was the second operation that we did, even though we had enough points, and we decided not to do any operation, and the Japanese didn't do any, then we would have lost quite a few more points. So you have to be aware of that situation as you're going through. We're at command points. We did that isolation. Everybody should be linked. Strategic transport. Again, there's not a lot for the Japanese to do. I believe, let me take a look. Yeah, I forgot strategic transport strictly from port to port, a link port to link port. This does not count as a port, so I can't get some more air units into Guadalcanal. I could do that in air fairing if I needed to at Battle Cycle, but for right now I can't really do anything. I guess I could get some more units in Port Moresby, but I don't see a need for it. Unless I think I'm going to transport, no, that's not from a port either. Yeah, it can only come from here or here and here, any combination of those. So I don't really have anything in New Caledonia to move. Yeah, that's not naval, and that's all you can do. Strategic transport, reinforcement, there's an easy one. Japanese does not get any reinforcements. The Allied gets a New Zealand light cruiser and also the Fletcher, and this can only go to headquarters, and that's going to be New Caledonia. So they will join the 466, where we have plenty of ships and nowhere to go yet. Reinforcements over. Naval repair, there's no naval repair. In the naval repair, I'd have to take the units off. I'm not going to do that. I do have some transport units with one hit each, but I'm not going to worry about taking them off the board. I need them for transporting. So engineering, there's nothing engineers can do. Remember, we captured this base because there's an engineer and we converted it right away. Submarine points, now this is already at 6. I don't know where this went, and so I don't have to add, I don't have to bring it up. This is going to be brought up to 6, which is the maximum you can have, but I have to pay for having these sub patrols again, so I'm going to have to take 1 CP off for each side. That we did move the sub patrol for both of them slightly, because there's going to be some naval movement in this area, and I don't want them to be able to avoid the subs. I wanted to do a quick interjection here because I missed the replacement step, and that's one of the things that I wanted to make sure we covered. It's got to be right there. I skipped from naval repair to engineering, but so it's kind of important to understand how that works in campaign strategic scenarios. So if you see here, the Allied has 2 ground replacements and 4 level 1 air. And the Japanese in August, every month actually in this scenario, they have 1 ground and 3 level 0. And the way that works is, let's take the level 0 first. So they have 3 replacements that they can do, and there's 2 places you can take full replacements for air. If you have air at the headquarters or an offensive support base, there's no problem getting air or ground to those spots. If you want to have air replacements somewhere else, you can do that by what they call an air bridge. And let's just say I had, we'll use this for an example, this F unit, and it's 10 hex range. So if I had, for instance, take another, let's put one here, up in this area. I want to get it far enough away. So way up over in New Guinea. And this is a 10 hex range, so it can't reach, if I go from the headquarters, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, can't reach here. Or it can reach here, but can't reach to here. So an air bridge would be simply taking or having another base where you could get to 10, and then you do the next hop over. It's basically rebasing as many times as you need, as long as each one of them are within the range of that air unit that you're replacing. So that's pretty simple. If I replace, let's use that one as an example, and let's say I only have L0, level 0 replacement steps, and let's say this had one step gone, and I want to replace that. I would actually be able to do that without affecting the level of the unit. And the way you figure that is how many steps are there before you replaced it. So in this case, there's 5 steps on this unit. I'm only replacing 1. So that's 50% or less than the original number of steps in that. So basically you're just saying you're not replacing L0 with so many steps that you degrade this unit. If I had, let's try, well, let's do 5, just so we can see how it works. Let's say that it had 5 steps lost. So there's only 1 step remaining. If I replace 1 step and make it to 4, even going to 4, I am now, because I went over 50% of the original number of steps. I had 1, I'm replacing 1, actually it's 100%. So so if I did that, in this case, this unit would have to be replaced with L0. As far as replacing ground steps, you can replace 3 if they're at fleet headquarters, or in this case, an offensive support base. You can replace up to 3 on 1 unit. If they're not there, as long as they're linked, you can replace 1 step on a ground unit. So I actually already did all that with each of the Japanese and the US, but I wanted you to understand how replacement steps happen and what the limitations are. With air units, level 2 air units can only be replaced with level 2. You can't degrade them. You can't add L1 or L0 to L2 air unit. L1s will take level 0 air replacement steps, but you have to be careful. You can only replace up to 50% of what the original number of steps were on that unit. And of course, level 0 can take any air steps. So that's replacement. One thing I want to do another sheet here. Trying to keep track of strategy for both sides is too much for my brain. But I did take a anytime you have a 6 troop quality for Japanese or the US or higher, they can create a regiment, and that's what I did with this. I created another regiment from this and took 3 steps off of that division. So my intention for the Japanese is to reinforce, move into one regiment into here, one into here, and then I'll have 7 steps here, 8 steps here, and 10 steps here. So that's fairly even, depending on where the Allied ends up doing their amphibious assault. So each of those 3 hexes of Bougainville will be covered with at least a decent amount of troops. Plus, I really need to get a 6 into here because of the troop quality, because even though there's 5 steps here, the 3 is not very high quality troops, and I would be in danger of having an invasion there, and that's not going to go well. So it'll be balanced for steps and also for TQ. So that's my idea anyway. Well, for operational player determination, the bids, and unless the Japanese builds up a future supply pool that's bigger than what they have now, they can't really do a lot as far as outbidding the Allied side, if the Allied side chooses to bid more than 15 or so. And they're actually going to bid 23 for a 14-day operation, and this is their intent. This is really going to be a kind of an interesting month, because even though there's 4 months left, the Allied side is running into the fact that they don't have transports enough to, they have plenty of infantry to go around, but they don't have enough transports to get everybody where they would like them to be. So I'm going to have to get a task force going down or towards this area and do some transferring. I've got a small task force coming from New Caledonia coming into Guadalcanal to get another transport ship there. And then the ships that are here, there's 3 of them, a transport plus some destroyers, are going to go and actually land at Shortland. There's no infantry there, but there is a ship, so we're going to have a little bit of a tiny battle maybe. If this ship is still there, they can't fire anything. So we'll see how that goes. We'll look at it maybe overrunning if we get in there without the Japanese reinforcing. So, and the only reason I'm going to do that is to get another anchorage that I can use for ships to anchor at. So we can have 3 here, 3 here, 3 here. I hope that's legal. So that my goal is to get some more transport down this area. There's transport that will be going here with a regiment of infantry, and we'll activate a few plane units here to soften up Bougainville Island. See if we can't get some broken units there with bombing. So that's the goal. Okay, a little update on this particular operation. I've got my focus starting out here on this Japanese task force, and as you can see, there's a Zuikaku regular carrier and Zuiho light carrier and an escort force. I generally try to have both anti-air factors for flak and also some sub factors so that we can do ASW if we need to. But the biggest issue here is that The Japanese just got tired of watching the Allied player waltz in to these islands unopposed, and with only 2 air units in this area for the Japanese, I think they feel the need. They're going to have to send in the carriers, and it's probably I don't know if I should have done it possibly the first month. That may have been true, because it only takes 9 points to get that kind of a force going, and they will have enough time to get it within position here, and then they can go either of these places to into port. So they're not going to have any problem getting some battle cycle attacks in if they get a chance to, and I think they will. So that's the situation. I have a small task force with an engineer ready to overrun this base, and that's they were able to move 2 with interception. They were able to move 2, and then Japanese stopped them with the detection. So we'll see how it plays out. All right, here's the end of the first battle cycle of the results. This task force coming down from Port Moresby is making its way. Did get this has to be flipped now. Forget to flip the detections, and this one is making its way to Guadalcanal. Japanese task force is moving into position to try to get some air attacks on some naval units. It might take more than one more battle cycle. They need to get to about here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. So they can harass the transport ships, maybe sink one of them. The CVS was eliminated through naval bombardment attacks. They used the gunnery strength because it wasn't activated. Subs here had no effect. The engineer unloaded and pretty much overran the base and converted it to the Allied side, so they have another air base they can land on. More important, we get 3 more ships we can have there, so we could have up to 9 ships in this area on the various anchorages. So that's the end of. Oh, and then I did, yeah, that was kind of important. I had 3 planes come off or have an air mission from Guadalcanal and attacked this Bougainville site, and they actually rolled a 0 with the 7 strength. They're actually quite strong for anti-ground attack. So that's a good thing. And they actually rolled a 0, so they eliminated this step of the Marines. They weren't able to do any broken or have any broken effect on the other infantry regiment that was there. And then the Japanese moved this regiment. It's the only activated unit in the area besides the task force that's coming, and they moved that over to reinforce here. So they now have 6 steps there, 5 steps here, and I think, let's see, 9. Yeah, there's 9 steps in Force 6. All right, we'll just do the after action of this particular operation. It wasn't as exciting as I thought it might be. The aircraft carriers did a couple of air missions against the U.S. task forces coming down, and they are absolutely ineffective. No hits whatsoever. The biggest action actually was the submarine patrols did some attacks that also weren't effective, but they each side lost 3 hits, so one more hit on the sub-patrol in this month and they can't search or attack, obviously. So the U.S. mission was successful for this operation. They've got, I'll take this task force off, they've got Shortland as a base. It's got 3 bases here now. They haven't started attacking Bougainville Island yet, but that will be coming, if not this month, next month. And the biggest change is that we've got some transport down here, but it's still going to be dicey. There's 3 ships in each of these anchorages. Again, we've got plenty of infantry, but not nearly enough transport as we'd like. We do have the, an AA transport here. I think it is, yeah, Force 5. So that can be used to pick up some of the bigger units. There's a Marine unit that's fairly large, and we've got we've got a couple of infantry divisions here. Actually, yeah, 2 infantry divisions, a regiment, and an engineer regiment as well. So it's kind of in preparation phase. I would say the biggest change right now is that the Japanese have 2 carriers in Rabaul, and they are ready to activate and strike. And I'd like to get some more ships from this large force we've got here over in Rabaul. I think the more pressure we can get in this area to immediately affect any kind of landings is going to be better for the Japanese. So we'll see what the end of August brings. Well, just a quick update on the start of this second half of August. The Allied player has bid 19 points. They're going to do a small operation, actually try to do some scouting and get a foothold in one of those hexes. They're not going to be able to take it over, but hopefully they can stick around. So we've got transport ships here, and we're going to go in and then some air to offer support from Guadalcanal. And the Japanese they've split off another regiment off this division. Is getting quite a bit smaller, and they activated one so they can move in. They need to get something in Force 2 because that TQ is not very high, so even a Marine unit would be higher than that, halved on amphibious assault, and then just a couple air units for support, and that's it. And we're off. All right, this is the end of August. I did do that small operation for the Allied side. It ended up being a surprise. I think the biggest key is I ended up getting one more hit on that sub-patrol, so that enabled me to get some naval movement in this area without getting harassed too much. The Japanese did have a couple of air units that did some naval attacks, but they didn't have any effect. I am down to 3 hits on my amphibious ship counter, and that could be dicey if I'm going to need to make sure that lasts through this amphibious incursion into Bougainville. I did get a foothold in Bougainville, but it's basically deadlocked here. I have in that force, I've got an APD destroyer and light cruiser sitting here in Anchorage, and then I have actually only 6 steps total between these two units. Just not a lot. They're very high in terms of troop quality, but a little bit fragile. If they lose too many more steps, I think they're vulnerable to counterattack. And this is what the Japanese player has 5 steps of that low quality 3rd Brigade or 3 TQ Brigade, and then only 1 step left of this regiment. So I think in September you're going to be looking at Japanese trying to reinforce Bougainville and make sure that they can't capture that. So it's not a done deal yet, even though there's 3 months left. The points, the command points for the Allied is looking okay, but it's a matter of being able to get the troops to the place where they're needed, and that's this 3 hex area. So I've got all my transport ships spread out in the Guadalcanal or in the Solomons on these different forces. So I've got the capability of moving some of those troops along. I have to remember that I can move ships, unload, come back, pick up. That's one thing I haven't been paying enough attention to. So the biggest issue is going to be these subs are going to be, it might go up to 12. I have to check. In September, yep. September, both of these sub patrols will be able to be at 12, which is going to cause issues. And I definitely think we're going to put both of them at 12 rather than 2 groups of 6, because you get 2 hits for each, or 2 rolls, or 2 attacks once you detect one of the task forces that are going through, and there's going to be a lot of back and forth in this area. So the so you can kind of get an idea, this is Guadalcanal. Remember, you can have 48 steps, so I'm not, it looks like a lot, but there's less than 16 there, so 20, 31, I think, 30, oops, and these 2 Marines, 33 steps. One thing I've noticed about this scenario that really, again, makes a big difference for the Allied side, having this base be a large base in Guadalcanal, these planes have been very effective. I've been activating these as much as I can, because you can see this one is pretty good for ground attack and 6. This one is excellent ground attack for getting those TQs or attacks on bases. And then this fighter unit is excellent anti-air with that 8. So those are very effective units, and they definitely come in handy in support. So basically the idea is on a landing, at least the way I've been doing it, is to get in there, land troops, do an air mission to try to get a TQ check on the highest unit of the Japanese, and then do bombardment, so you can do that as well. And then you do the ground attack. If you're the advantage player, even if you're not, you still get to try to get those broken units happening, because you'll get it on the next battle cycle if you don't get advantage the first one. All right, on to September. I'm checking here at the beginning of September. Rolled for weather. It's going to be clear again. Big surprise. I did command points. It doesn't really look that good for Japanese, because they have only 12 command points this turn, and Allied gets 45, and it only goes up from there in the next 2 months. I think 60 or 50 and 60. And Japan actually goes down to 10. Yeah. So most that Japan can do is maybe a little bit of reinforcement and get the carriers involved for some harassment of any more landings that they might have, and of the attacking force here at where 70 is in Bougainville. But I wanted to make a note of the connections that you have to look at for being linked. And I actually landed this F plane. It's a good thing that I had this base. That's probably why you need to take it, because this fighter unit is right here, and the Japanese actually have a fighter unit, I think, in this hex at the base. So for this to be linked, or this, because there's an F-type unit within 2 of these hexes, the Japanese would have to have an F-type unit here in order to counteract that. Otherwise, this would be interdicted. Now, technically, this isn't going to interfere as much because it only you can trace into the hex. You can, just pretend I had a unit there. I couldn't trace the linked chain of water hexes through this or this or this or this, so it kind of blocks that off. But having an F-type unit, as the Japanese does here, counteracts that. So they are linked here, these hexes. Same goes vice versa. This is more important that the Allied has a F-type unit here, because Japanese have F here, and technically all these hexes here within 2 of this hex would be blocked off for any kind of supply chain for being linked. So that's what you need to think about in terms of supply. Those F units are invaluable on both sides. Alright, I wanted to show you the results of this Battle of Bougainville Island, because it's probably decisive. Remember, we're in September right now, so the 3rd month in. This is a situation in the ground combat phase. I chose night for this opening phase. Let's back up a little bit. The Japanese rolled a 9 on their strategic intelligence, so it was almost guaranteed. If you look over here, it was almost guaranteed that there was going to be a surprise, because it only had a level of 1 on the operational or strategic intelligence spot, and Allied had level 4, so it was surprise again. One of the things that I didn't mention before, I got rid of got rid of these pesky CVS's. If you remember in early parts of the video, there were 2 of them in this area, and they're really quite annoying as far as searching during contact phase movement, because they have spotter planes. They don't have an LRA, but it doesn't really matter, because if you look at the chart in contact phase, this is the spotter plane that we're talking about, and it's such close quarters down there that anytime I had a task force set up to move, it's like a 50-50 shot if it's in the next hex, and even if it's 2 hexes away, it's 40% chance. So none of the surprise intelligence conditions really mattered as far as moving. I couldn't move. Usually I couldn't move out of the first hex. It was stuck at 0. So in that respect, they were a pain in the neck. And so in the last month and a half, I finally took some destroyers in and took care of those 2 ships. But once I got all these set up for this September operation, the Japanese has a plane here, and they have carrier planes here. So they had enough search units to stop me in my tracks, because once any task force is detected in the surprise scenario or surprise intelligence level, you can stop your opponent. So, and that's what they did. So I did some shuffling around. The task force were moving. I was getting a little nervous because there's 12 points here in the submarine patrol, and I had 4 shots at this APD. Oops, right there. Not APD. The amphibious. It's down to 4 hits. So if it moves again, the submarines could sink that. But I don't think I'm going to need it. It's moving a division towards Bougainville, but this is the results. Because it was night turn, I used night turn as cover so that I didn't have any harassing by the Japanese planes. I didn't mind having my planes grounded. The biggest thing that happened was that the bombardment by my destroyers caused a TQ check on this regiment and rolled an 8. So this was broken, which means you're going to have to use this as a lead unit, and I'll tell you why. And it ended up happening that it didn't really matter, but if so this was the lead unit. It has 5 steps as opposed to 2 for this, and at this point they're the same troop quality because this one's halved, being broken. So this is the situation. I had 8 steps here in this Marine unit. Anyway, that's what the SF is, and they have this little tiny like wings in their as a symbol on their counter, as opposed to the Marine unit. And then I was able to land another regiment. This should be 1 actually, 1 step gun. So I had 19 steps. I think it's 8. No, that was total. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 17, 18, 19. Yeah, 19 for the total between the 2 sides. And this was the lead unit. This is, of course, the lead unit for the Allied side. And as you can see, it's finally in the Allied favor on the chart. You can follow 8 across to 3 is 14. You're looking at the 14 column. Normally that'd be great, but again, it's mixed terrain, so you have to go over 3 to the left, 1, 2, 3, and then I rolled 2, I believe. No, I rolled 3. Could have had a retreat over here, but I would have had to take a TQ in order to stay. So that was 2 steps and 3 steps, but the more important thing is a mandatory retreat. And then the lead unit, in order to not retreat, has to roll or pass a TQ check. Let me focus that there. So it has to get a 3 or less. That's a 40% chance, but I rolled a 7. So that was the result of the TQ check. Therefore, they could not stay, and the Japanese has to retreat. And because there's more, let's bring it out. There's more steps on the Allied side than Japanese, so the Japanese are all lost. and then the Allied side has to lose half the number of steps that the Japanese lost, and that's before any CRT results. So you don't even look at the CRT. There's 5 steps there, 6, 7. You round up. Half of 7 is 3.5. So round up 4. So I have to lose 4 steps on the lead unit. So now we've got 10 here. So not a lot left of the Marines, but they captured that hex. So this is no longer Japanese. I don't have an engineer there. The base is overrun, and the plane unit is destroyed, although there's only 1 step left in this little L1F. That's going to affect links down here too. So I probably will take a look at this to see. We'll play this out, see what happens with the Japanese side, but after the first battle cycle, it does not look good for the Japanese in September. Just a quick update on the Japanese side on their disadvantage battle cycle. They unfortunately lost with 2 critical hits. The sub-patrol had 4 attacks because it had 12 points here. And the Japanese are trying to move down to reinforce with a covering carrier. Unfortunately, it's night, so they can't do any air missions. And they lost this in 2 critical hits. Out of the 4 dice, I had 2 zeros, one of which I rolled a 9. The other one I didn't. It was probably a 3 or something. So they lost this troop carrier, destroyer transport, and that regiment. So is not looking great for Japanese. On to the next battle cycle. So this is the status at the end of September and beginning of October. I think this will probably be the last month that I do, because I don't think the Japanese have a lot of options. They actually need to get this hex contested. That's possible, but we'll see how many points they can muster. Each of the sides passed on doing an operation in the second part of September, and they put into force or the future pools for October. So in October, the Allied are actually going to have, I think, let's see, 70 or 65 actually total points to spend, and the Japanese are going to have like 14. So they could probably, and I think they will, the Allied side are going to bring in their carriers finally and see if we can get a 21-day operation. That's going to cost double the points, but I think we can manage that. We have the following, I'll bring them over here so you can see better. Following were destroyed on the Allied side. We lost the Marechal, what was left of the Marechal division on this amphibious transport, but through sub attacks. And the Japanese, of course, lost the 2 CBSs earlier, and the APD with a regiment on it, and these are ones they've lost in ground combat. And they no longer have a fighter plane on that base in the area, so it's kind of a tough situation for the Japanese considering the number of command points they have. So each month, it's not a lot. They can do a little bit of counterattacking and reinforcing and harassment, but that seems like that's about it. It's kind of waiting for the inevitable. As long as the allied player can get forces to bear in this area for ground troops, and that's a matter of getting the amphibious transport. Now, this is an issue because I don't have any other AA units. I only have APD, so they can. I've actually got one. Well, I guess there's one more division left, and that's not going to be going anywhere unless I break it down. So it's only going to be transporting regiments or battalions for the Allied side, which is probably enough because I've got 9 steps, I think, here, and they have 6 here and 11 here. So probably, and with the 2 8s that I have for troop quality in that 470, that's going to be tough to break out of that hex. So we'll try one more month and see how that goes and give an update. Okay, I'm going to end this other series I did on campaign number 5, I think it was, the Upper Solomons campaign, and I think I'm at the point where I've gotten through enough of the campaign, and honestly, the reinforcements for if I jump back here, reinforcements for the Allied side in last month, in case they didn't have enough, that's what they get in the last month. So I don't think there's a lot to be gained at this point for me, and probably for you as well. I think you've probably seen enough to learn from some of my mistakes and take a look at the process step by step of what you're doing in a campaign. My general thoughts are, this particular campaign, I know I made some mistakes on the Japanese side, and I probably cheated in some ways on the Allied side, specifically in activation of units that probably, if I look back, were probably activated more than once in a month, which is illegal. It was inadvertent, but I talked about that before, about use of the force charts to do that correctly. But my thoughts on the campaign scenarios are this. I think they're the best way to really appreciate the systems in Pacific War. That it just adds so many more decisions to make when you're looking at a long term, even if it's only 3 months or 4 months or 5 months. There's a lot to think about, and I think that's where the game definitely shines the most, are on the campaigns. I can't speak of the strategic scenario. As Mark Herman has said, at least he told me, that's a totally different game to wrap your head around. But I'm going to say this about the campaign scenarios too. You can play them solitaire, but first of all, even though there's not technically hidden movement, you see fleets as they're moving. You see where forces are, and technically you can attack a force without knowing what's there, unlike task forces that need to be detected before attacking. So you can see that happening, but with campaign scenarios, you first get a real sense of hidden intentions, I think is how I would put it, because you don't know what's been activated. Once you've you're playing face to face. You don't know what the enemy is activated. You don't know how much it's activated. You don't know what the operational intelligence is. It could be surprise, it could be intercept. Yes, once you get to this period of the war, the likelihood that the Allied side is going to have surprise is very high. And in fact, if you have a 20% chance of ambush for quite a bit of the time. If you look up there, when you see all that blue, that's level 4. And when you see the Japanese pinkish red, that's level 1. So intelligence-wise, the likelihood, if the Allied side is getting the operation, it's most likely going to be a surprise. And that isn't necessarily great in the contact phase, because if there's close quarters, once the first task force is detected by the Japanese, they can stop all movement, at least naval movement. But during the battle cycles, it's a big advantage for surprise, because the Allied side is going to get surprise first, and then the next rounds of the battle cycles, they're going to have a +2 die roll for every roll. So most of the time, on average, the Allied side is going to be going first in battle cycle, which is an advantage, as they say. My other major thought about playing the campaign scenarios solo is exactly what I ran into, and that is having to think about both sides. Sometimes there are some games where you can kind of play one side and then do all the moves and then switch sides, and it seems to work fairly well as far as, switching mindsets once you switch to the other side. And you do, there's so much planning involved with both sides once you get into a campaign scenario, that I think it's a lot more difficult for a solo player to take the time and remember to do the planning for both sides as equally as they can. I'm not saying that it can't be done. I'm just saying it's more difficult as a solo player. I think you do lose some of that sense of surprise when you've had some forces that were activated and you didn't expect them to be there. And with this particular scenario, there's probably not as much as that, because the Japanese are so outnumbered, and the Allied side has pretty clear goals as far as getting those 2 hexes. So it's not impossible. It's not even less than desirable. I would still play a campaign scenario solo. I'd still have fun with it. I'm just saying that you're going to have to put a little bit more effort into each side. I definitely think put more effort into it as I was doing a video series of this particular campaign. I don't think I did either side justice, but probably especially the Japanese side. So that's my 2 big thoughts about playing campaign scenarios, and things to think about before you set off on that part of your journey with this game. But again, there's a lot there. There's many campaign scenarios to take a look at. But my next step, as I said before, is I would like to do some face-to-face, at the very least on Vassal, and see where that takes me. So I'm going to pack this up and actually get ready, since I've taken delivery and started punching Roads to Baston by MMP, the next GTS series game, and see if I can't get that started in the next week or so. So thanks for putting up with this series, and I hope you'll learn something. That's the biggest thing, and that's again why I watch other people's videos, is to learn something about a particular game that makes it easier for me to get into and more fun and hopefully more successful. All right, thanks, and we'll check in with you later.